Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And once again, thank you for joining us for another edition of the Pure Digital Passion podcast with me, Moses Kemibaro. My guest today is Akshay Gover, the Group CEO of Cellulant, a payments aggregation business that operates across the African continent, working with some of the largest companies, organizations that require financially based solutions through their offerings. Thank you very much for joining us, Akshay.
Moses, thank you so much for inviting me here. It's a pleasure.
So actually, you're involved in this amazing business that has been growing incredibly, I think, over the last 20 years or so. You have an impressive Pan-African footprint for your offerings, working with some of the biggest banks and payment service providers. I'd like you maybe to, first of all, give us a sense of who you are, where you're coming up from, both personally and professionally, just to get a flavor of who you are as a person.
Yeah, sure. Akshay Grover, as you said, I was born in India.
Okay.
Uh, for a good part of my childhood, grew up in India, studied over there. Um,
Which part of India, if I may ask?
Multiple parts of India. So some part in Calcutta, some
Uh-huh.
part in Delhi,
Okay.
some part in Mumbai.
Okay.
But between the three cities, sort of 20 years went by.
Okay. Okay.
That's where I grew up. And then I spent like close to a decade or so uh, in investment banking and private equity, investing in telecom media technology, also in India, and
Okay.
then partly in the Middle East,
Uh-huh.
um, in Dubai.
Okay.
And then from there, somehow got involved with Africa in 2007. That was the first time I landed in Cameroon.
Wow.
I set foot in Africa in Cameroon.
Are you a French speaker?
No, I'm not. Don't ask me what happened there. But but that was the beginning. We were advising one of the large businesses in India to acquire a business in Cameroon,
Okay.
and that was my first interaction with Africa. And then ever since, then I got involved with another business called Ison, which was
I've heard of
in the
them.
IT and the BPO services.
Yeah, I've heard of them. Yeah.
So I helped them raise capital for their business to start off in Africa, and then actually joined them in 2014, 15, um, to head up strategy, fundraising, M&A as the first step. Did multiple executive roles in building up that business here in Africa.
Okay.
Saw that business and contributed to growing that business from like maybe we were initially in 3 countries with 100 people. That business is now probably 25 countries, 25,000 people in
Wow.
Africa.
It's massive.
Um, did a lot of stuff in Africa during those 6 years,
Okay.
and then found myself at Cellulant.
So that's interesting because the transition from the BPO managed services space, I presume, working with some of the telcos and so forth across Africa, and then joining Cellulant, which is in sort of the payments, digital payment space. I presume you're headhunted for this or something of the nature?
Yeah, I mean, well, definitely headhunted, but I think, friends and friends, and somehow some things come to you. So I
Okay.
feel a little bit of destiny, um, and a little bit of actual headhunting.
Mm. What is it that appealed to you about joining Cellulant? What was the attraction, I suppose, that eventually got you there, where you've been now for almost 2 years?
I mean, for me, 6 years in Africa, I'd kind of seen the way things happened here, how business was done,
Uh huh.
and I had a feeling that there were two or three sectors that were going to do incredibly well in Africa. Fintech was one. The other one where I felt there would be a lot of work and, let's call it a lot of development, was
Hmm.
infrastructure, and infrastructure as in healthcare, technology infrastructure like telecom infrastructure,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And then the third sector I felt, which could have really gone through or grown rapidly, has been education
The
and
edtech
ed
space,
tech
maybe.
space. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh, and some of this was just comparing it to back home in India,
Mm.
because it felt like there were a lot of common elements on the driver's side. You know, young population, not so great infrastructure, all the same problems that I think emerging markets have. I felt like there was a lot of similarity, and I felt like those were some of the important sectors that really took off over the last 5-10 years in India. I felt like some of these were also budding to grow in Africa,
Mm.
and that's why that kind of got my interest on Cellulant.
So common ingredients, common commonalities in
Commonalities.
markets and scenarios, absolutely. And I think we see a lot of those parallels indeed with places like Southeast Asia, Africa, the kind of startups and the technology businesses that we see emerging in this space. I think that's definitely true. Um, so you joined, as I recall, you joined Cellulant at the time that I think it was going through some sort of massive transition from the original founders, you coming in. And I'm wondering what that was like coming into an organization. And I think joining during the pandemic, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
Um, how has that been, or how was that coming in and having to, steady the ship, so to speak, with all that transition happening at that point in
Yeah.
the middle of a pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, when I landed in Kenya, I still remember I was staying at a service department for a couple of months, and I was the only person staying in that service department.
Wow.
So you had the move and book service department. There was nobody there,
Wow.
and me and my family were the only ones living there for a couple of months. But anyway, I think um, look, it's always. I mean, the founders have really built this business with a load of sweat to get it to where it was.
Mm-hmm,
In any
mm-hmm.
case, and I think Ken was looking to step down and hand over the baton to somebody.
Yeah.
So that was one part of the transition. But uh, and it's always I think hard to step into the shoes of the founder, because at very different levels,
Yeah.
um, it's not your baby. You see what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? You kind of taking, you can never have exactly the same sentiment that I think a founder does for his business. And I think sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not so good.
Yeah.
You know, because when you, I think I think the way you build a business, how you contribute to, how you think about the business, becomes a little more unemotional, and sometimes that's
Mm,
good, and
mm.
sometimes it's not good. And it just depends on the stage of the business.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But I think overall that was one piece of the transition, but there were other pieces of the transition that were already in play, which we really built upon
Okay.
over the last 2 years. And
Such
what
as,
and one of those
yeah.
was, for example, we were very closely working with the banking system, with the banks. And even today, I mean, when you transfer money from your bank account to M-Pesa or vice versa, Cellulant enables probably 75-80% of those transactions in this market and a bunch of other markets as well, right? But the important transition that we were trying to make was that we did, the way we had built our architecture, the way we'd built our services was sort of like a service business where there was a lot of customization for every customer.
Mm,
And we wanted to transition that from being service oriented or customer oriented to product oriented.
mm.
Because the more you productize your solutions and services, the greater the ability to scale,
Because then it becomes a plug and play
because you can
proposition.
plug and play,
Yeah.
right? And so we went through a massive effort of saying, hey, firstly, what out of the suite of things that we are doing do we want to focus on?
Mm,
So, step number one was identifying what was going to be the new core, because you couldn't convert everything to a product. It would be very
mm.
challenging, and
Yeah.
then it would be very difficult to execute. So, we narrowed down on three particular areas that we productized, and we started that journey. The second part of the transition journey was the technology architecture itself,
Mm,
because now when you're building architecture and you want microservices to exist, etc., then the way you design your architecture also depends on this productization that I'm talking about, because you want almost to say, hey, this customer wants this feature. Yeah. And the way you build it in the technology architecture is like a switch on and off.
okay.
Yeah. So now A customer wants this, I turn it on. B customer doesn't want it, I turn it off.
And you have all these use cases preempted in there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so when you do that transition, it's a big transition at a technology architectural level. And then within our technology, the second big migration was that we wanted to move away from on-premise to cloud,
Uh-huh.
so that we would again be able to process 10x, 100x, 1000x the number of transactions that we were processing at the time without any lags in the system. And so we moved our entire architecture to the cloud. And today that's why we're running on Amazon. And so that was a second transition, technology. There was a third transition. And that third transition was, how do we better manage operating efficiency? Which is, of course, as a startup, you're always growing very rapidly. When you're
Mm.
growing rapidly, your systems, processes, security, technology, all of that needs to keep pace. And at some point or the other, because you're in a growth journey, a lot of these, I think, get don't get the don't get the same level of attention that they should.
Yes.
But they are important components also to growth. Yeah. And so we started focusing on that third piece on the transition. So sorry, that's a very long answer to your
No, no, but I
question.
think you've completely preempted my actually the question I had for you next. But yeah, continue, please.
Yeah. So those are the three broad areas where we spend time and effort, and it's taken us a time. It's always a journey, right? Nothing gets done in one day. You work at it, and we're continuing to work and improvise on some of those things. But we're very proud of the fact that through this process, we've always kept the heart, which has been compliance with regulation,
Mm,
with the law, business within the law. Even today, we've got very strict criteria on what kind of customers we can onboard.
mm,
There are many customers that give very large volumes, and you would have heard of all kinds of things happening to some of our competitors, but it's very unlikely that you would have heard that about Cellulant. And there's a reason for that. We don't onboard the customers. We have a strict criteria on who we onboard. And so we know what transactions are passing through our system most of the time. Yeah, all the time. We also then are compliant with the law in terms of saying, if I have a license, I have a license. And if I don't have a license, I will not do one, two,
mm.
three, and four in these markets. It's always tempting to do business
And cut those corners.
and cut the corners. But we've kind of, I think, been measured in the way we approach that. And I think that also has helped us to build a foundation. Granted, we may not have grown as fast as some of the people, but that's a choice we made.
So assume that I'm somebody who's completely clueless about what Cellulant does. How would you describe your business? Who do you serve in the market? And maybe some of the things that differentiate you from them. Maybe you can share with us those three perspectives.
Yeah. I mean, today I think of our business as two distinct elements of our business. Element number one is what I call pay ins or collections. So we enable collections for people, for merchants. Yeah. So if you go and you order food on Glovo, somebody collects your money from a credit card, from a bank account, from a mobile money wallet, and that's Cellulant. If you go and make an airline booking
Mm-hmm.
on Ethiopian Airlines, on Kenyan Airways, on Emirates.com into Africa, you go and pay for your ticket, chances are Cellulant is processing your payment and collecting those funds on behalf of those customers. And then we settle those customers in a predefined time frame. So for many of these customers, we collect funds for them across 5 markets, 10 markets, 15 markets, depending on their footprint and presence and the service requirement. Yeah. So that's one part of our bouquet of services. The second part of our bouquet of services is what we call payouts. And payouts has two components: domestic payouts and what we call cross border payouts. Domestic payouts is when you transfer money from your M-Pesa to your bank account,
Mm-hmm.
Cellulant does that. Bank account to M-Pesa, Cellulant does that.
Okay.
Yeah. So it could be bank account to mobile money back into mobile
Mm-hmm.
bank account. It could be anything domestically executed.
Yes.
Yes. Where I am paying money into an account.
Yes.
Yeah. Pay out. And then the second part of it is cross border. Somebody is sending, your brother is sending you money from the UK, uh, which could be via Western Union, one of the large aggregators, Chipper Cash and AfriX, a Nala, I don't know, a Western Union, a TransferWise. All of these people connect to Cellulant or to players like Cellulant,
Okay.
and what they would do is fund fund us in US dollars overseas, and then we would enable them to transfer funds into individual bank accounts or into individual mobile money wallet accounts and so on. And so that's payouts. So our business is collections or pay-ins and payouts.
Interesting. I like the way you've just sort of succinctly described your business, because I think for me, it's always felt a bit abstract, just to understand exactly what Cellulant does. But I think you've articulated it very, very well in terms of what you do. So I'm also curious because I think in the fintech space across African continent, as we know, is very vibrant. A lot of funding has gone into this area in the last, say, decade or so. Celent itself has also been very well known in terms of raising substantial resources to expand your operations and activities. I'm just curious to understand, from your perspective, what are the things that you think makes Cellulant unique or better than others who might offer similar service? Of course, longevity is one of them. You've been around in this space a long time. You've almost written the playbook from that point of view. But what are some of the reasons or the things that you would say differentiate you from others who might offer similar products or services?
Uh, I mean, I would say the first thing, and I talked about this very briefly in my previous question to you, DNA, who we are. And I said that um, it's about, we want to do business within certain boundaries, within a certain ethical framework. And I think over time, people realize that they would like to do business with such people, because there are ramifications when you don't do that. So
Mm,
I feel like it takes time, but the right way is the best way. So it's DNA.
mm,
Second, and let me come now to the more tangible answers, which maybe people are looking at. This business is, in a way, powered by infrastructure. So the question is, if you don't have a road going to a location,
mm,
you cannot reach that destination. If
correct.
there's no airport, right? There's no airport, there's no road, it's very hard to reach the destination. Cellulant has built 350 roads to 300 plus banks and to 300 and to 50 plus mobile network operators,
Across
where
the
we,
African
across the
continent.
African continent. And a lot of our competitors have not. And they say we are present, yeah, but they've aggregated to multiple parties,
Mm,
right? And now you see, when you build infrastructure, technology infrastructure, the more hops you create between one connection and the next connection, it impacts your quality of service. So if I go and connect to a bank via a third party, now there are three systems involved: the bank system, the third party system, and my system.
not to mention the latency as well.
So there's latency, but there's also three different networks that need to talk simultaneously at exactly the same level at all times.
Increasing the
And
possibility of failure.
and any change made in any system, which by the way are dynamic, because everyone's doing, where nobody's static in this business, right? I'm developing systems, I'm developing technology, I'm changing things. So is the bank, so is the third party, and everything's got to work seamlessly,
Mm,
right? So when you do this business, the more direct integrations you have, it impacts quality of service. So
mm,
that's the second thing, tangible thing. So there is the physical road, whether it is there or not there, that's been built by Cellulant over a very long period of time. The second piece is quality of service because of those hops. Uh, The third piece, and this is extremely important, is we are a business that straddles both collections and payouts.
Mm.
And that's a very important distinction. So you would find players in Africa focused on either collections or on payouts. And why does that matter? I'll tell you why it matters. Because when we go to a customer, I don't want to name the specific customer, but let's say a ride hailing business. Yeah, there was a time for one of these when we used to do only collections because customer pays
Mm.
and we debit a credit card or we debit a bank account or we debit a
And you
mobile money
acquire the
account and we collect the
payment.
money, right?
Mm.
And then this ride hailing company came to us and they said, "Hey guys, we've got, I don't know, 200,000 drivers in Africa. 40,000 are in Kenya, 30,000 in Ghana, 50,000 in Nigeria, whatever, right? And we need to pay these drivers commissions every day because we collect the money, but we need to pay them their share,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Can you help us terminate into their accounts, into their mobile money wallets?" We said we can. And now, so for me as a service provider, I am encompassing both the collections leg as well as the payouts. And also, payouts is happening in this case to their drivers. But payouts could be happening to their vendor partners, could be for salaries, could be for anything,
Mm. Mm.
right? And so that enables me to target a much larger addressable market for the customer. So, so it's a little bit of DNA, it's a little bit of the pipes and the quality of service, and it's a
Yes.
little bit of the depth and breadth of product suite.
Fantastic. So, it's so funny because I always think about, the origins of Cellulant. And I think going back, almost 20 years ago, there was even a time I think you used to do music, downloadable music. And then I think the financial services came later. We started seeing you go there. And I'm just curious in terms of, the pivoting or the transitions that Cellulant is going through. Um, where is that coming from? Where is it going? Are you seeing in the roadmap further pivots in this respect? In the payment space. I just want to hear maybe your point of view around what has happened and what is maybe going to happen.
So, one of the important things here I'd like to distinguish between is a pivot and an evolution of a business model.
Mm.
So, when we went from music or digital music business to, let's call it, financial services, switching between the bank and mobile money and building the first pipes between banks and mobile money architecture, mobile money systems, I would still maybe refer to it as a pivot.
Yeah, significant.
They are significant, a change, like you changed. When we went from this sitting in the middle as a switch between the banks and mobile money systems to now a merchant payment focused business, I would
Hmm.
still say it's a pivot.
It's that significant.
It is significant. It's using the same infrastructure, but who we are serving has changed because we are now going and acquiring those merchants ourselves. We are going in a DSTV, which is the largest satellite TV business, is a customer of ours. Yeah, all the large telcos we're now doing recharge for them. That's a customer for us. Yeah, um, some of the customers I named, Jumia,
Mm.
Uber Eats, Glovo, etc., etc. These are all direct merchants who are customers of Cellulant today, right?
Okay.
And so we've gone and acquired these customers and we've brought them onto our platform and we're processing payments, collecting payouts, whatever it is for them, right? So it is a pivot. What I see here onwards is, I think, more an evolution of the business model because payments, I mean, online payments in Africa today about $50 billion market. That's what a lot of different reports, and there are many reports that say different numbers, but I'm just quoting. It's $50 billion. The offline market, which is the store, the corner store,
Mm-hmm.
or going into a ShopRite, or going into a Carrefour, or going into one of these stores, Pick and Pay, uh, that market is almost 20 times the $50 billion market that I'm talking about. Interestingly, Also, another differentiator with our competitors, we're also in that space. And the reason we're in that space is because we find that it's a very lucrative market size to leave in Africa open. We find not too many people focusing on that market segment.
And this is the cash side of things, or what are we calling
This
this?
is this is QR code. So
Aha,
you
okay,
could
point of
go
sale.
point of sale,
Yeah,
QR code, POS, whatever it is going to be, right? But POS as in smart POSes, so Android POSes, where you could make a mobile money payment, you could make a payment from your bank account, you could also make a payment from a credit card,
all in one terminal.
all in one terminal. Yeah. So that's what we've deployed in Nigeria, in Lagos,
Ah,
literally
nice.
2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Okay.
But and that's not in the news, but it'll be in the news. But the where I was going with this is that we think that some of this is evolving
Mm,
from payment solutions to a lot more than just payment solutions, because some of our merchants are asking us, don't just aggregate payments for me. And we are saying, yeah, we agree, we should solve a problem for you. And so there are multiple problems we are trying to solve for them now, which is adjacent to payments, but not specifically payments. I'll give you an example. One of the biggest pain points for merchants is reconciliation of payments.
mm.
I mean, if you look at the nightmare of somebody, you find it very easy to go to a store and pay by M-Pesa, correct? But I can tell you, for the merchant, it's a pain. Maybe lesser in Kenya because M-Pesa is still 90% of the transactions. But when you go to Ghana, when you go to Zambia, when you go to Tanzania, when you go to Uganda, firstly, you have 3 mobile operators. Yeah. So every customer that comes to your store, he could be an MTN customer, he could be a Vodafone customer, he could be an Airtel customer, and he might be some fourth operator customer. Correct? And all of them have mobile wallets, and all of them need to make payments. And then you have at least half a dozen large banks in every market. So you'll find a sticker for A bank and B bank and C bank, and you'll find 4 POS machines. Correct? That's what your typical
Very
large
messy.
store looks like. And now imagine this owner, how does he collect money? One operator says to him, for all transactions up to 8 p.m., I will settle you the same day. Another operator says, for all transactions up to midnight, I will settle you the next day.
Mm.
Third guy says, I will settle you T+2. Somebody says, I'll settle you T+4 for any transaction after on Friday, because Saturday, Sunday, I don't settle. Now, imagine if you're a merchant, how do you reconcile what you sold today and what you collected? So that's a solution that Ting today gives. We auto reconcile everything because everything is passing through one system, which is the Ting system, which is our platform, right? And when it does, it gives you a auto reconciled position. So you know everything that's happened in and out in your account at the press of a button. It's already available. What has not come is also available, right? So that's an example of solving problems around the payment business. Another example that we're just launching now in Zambia is lending to the merchants.
Mm.
One of the problems is in Africa today is, I think we all know, somebody said that there are, I mean, today when you go and look at, there have been some very successful players in lending,
Mm.
mobile
Mm.
lending, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and for me, I'm not sure I fully concur that. Of course, they've been successful because they have lent a lot of money. But the question is, at what rate are you lending that money?
Mm.
You're lending that money at a rate of 10% per month, sometimes even 20% per month.
We know the stories. We know the horror stories.
That's equal to 240% interest per annum. You are incentivizing people to borrow at an obscene cost and putting them in my opinion, into a debt trap. Because how does an individual get out of, I mean, if for every $100, if I have to pay $340 back, will I ever come out of the debt?
No.
So the question is, what are we doing as an ecosystem and of course as a business We are not the only guys operating. We need the support of government. We need the support of regulators. We need the support of mobile network operators. We need the support of banks and financial institutions. We are not working in isolation here.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the question that we're trying to address is, how do we solve that? Yeah. How do you make lending or credit available at terms may, in my opinion, still be high,
Yeah.
but not punitive? Yeah. And so we are working on a solution with some partners, including banks, of saying how do we manage this entire dynamic, right? Some banks and some development financial institutions collectively partner and then start lending to these merchants so that we can provide them some credit, enable their business to grow. And of course, we are making money on interest. We'll also make money on the payment volume,
Mm,
etc., etc. But we'll enable them to borrow when today they don't have access to that finance.
yeah. That's fantastic. So, if I'm hearing this correctly, there's a lot of things happening, and I talked about Ting, which is your platform, but basically, it's evolving. It's becoming. At one point, you are pivoting, but you are really expanding into much more than payments, isn't it?
That is true.
Fantastic, fantastic. I have to ask also, how is Cellulant getting involved in the area of financial inclusion? I mean, I think you've alluded to that already, but is that something that you're deliberately pursuing? Creating solutions that allow marginalized people to come into these digital ecosystems as far as financial services are concerned.
I think in very many ways,
Yes.
and let me give you some examples of what we're doing. So, you know, we were working with one of the FMCG companies
Mm-hmm.
in Nigeria, and and it's a big problem there that you see the the quantum of cash payments is much more than Kenya. And so, if you're an FMCG business and you are an FMCG retailer, distributor, partner, right? The way it works is that the master distributor sells to the distributor the products. The distributor then sells to multiple retailers, etc., etc.
There's a
Right?
cycle there.
It's a cycle, right? And now imagine a truck of some goods, which could be FMCG type goods, could be beverages, could be whatever, goes out in the morning and delivers X crates to one retailer, Y crates to another retailer, and so on and so forth. Do you know that it takes almost 7 to 10 days for that credit of the funds which the retailer has paid to reach the distributor? And the reason is because cash is counted some 7 or 8 times before it actually is deposited in a bank, because retailer pays, somebody is collecting, he's on a
Mm,
trip. Yeah. And we said, why are we doing cash? And we convinced the FMCG guys that why don't you use the Ting platform to digitize these entire transactions? And you can create a virtual wallet system where somebody is moving money from a bank account to a wallet,
yeah.
and then you're doing instant credits. And now suddenly the working capital cycle of this retailer
Mm,
has come down from 10 days or 7 days to 1 day.
amazing.
So what are you doing enabling, right? You are enabling a small entrepreneur who could be in a remote part of the country to say, instead of your working capital cycle being $100, it's now $10. So what is he going to do? He can order more goods. He can sell more. And if he sells more, he earns more. And if he earns more, he hires more people.
It's just turning over,
Uh,
turning over, turning over.
because he's using the same amount of capital to achieve a higher out throughput.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is one illustrative example. There are many such examples. Another example is cross currency transactions,
Mm,
which could be for businesses that are looking to do business outside of the geography, right? So can I enable acceptance of cross border payments? I want to sell my goods as a Kenyan seller of, I don't know, let's say furniture or clothes. I want to, why should my market be restricted only to Kenya? If you give me an ability to provide logistics, if you give me an ability to accept payments in multiple currencies at a reasonable cost, All of Africa is my market. In fact, I could argue that even the world, but for a moment, let's stick to Africa. It's a big market by itself, right? So you can open up the market for some of these entrepreneurs, and that's what they're looking for. But you have to solve the underlying problems in between to actually achieve it. I'm not saying again that Cellulant is solving all the problems. We are not. Wherever we can solve the problem ourselves, we do. And wherever we can't, we would go partner. Logistics is not my business.
Mm,
I
mm,
will go find logistics
mm.
partners, right? And I will work with them. Financing, I don't have a balance sheet to finance people. So I have to work with the banks. And some of them are opening up to these conversations and saying, yeah, this makes sense. We should do it.
So able to orchestrate all these players
So the question
into.
is, can you orchestrate and bring it to solve a problem?
Fantastic. And I'm seeing a big opportunity, like what you're just talking about, like the Africa Free Trade, uh, you know, arrangement that is now in place, which allows businesses across markets to sell and buy and so forth. So clearly, that's a great opportunity around the payment space, right?
Correct. That is.
Fantastic. So I want to talk a little bit about, maybe two things. One is the pandemic. How did that impact the business? We're now coming out of it. You arrived in the middle of it, but I'm just curious to see and hear, how did Cellulant navigate that, and what did it do for your business in terms of performance? The second question that I also have for you is maybe a little bit about this new partnership that you've done with Mastercard around a sort of a platform agnostic mobile wallet. Maybe you can share a little bit more about what that is and how it works.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think the pandemic has been, to my mind, uh, has been damaging for society overall. That's
Mm,
what I feel. I mean, other than, of course, the number of deaths that have happened and the kind of damage that has happened to economies.
yeah,
The fact of matter is that even today, whatever we are seeing in the world, inflation, the currency depreciation that we've experienced in the last 6 months or 9 months, has all been effectively brought about by COVID.
absolutely.
And obviously, some of the monetary actions that were taken at the time with whatever logic they were undertaken, right?
Yeah.
So I think the overall effects have not been great, but there is a silver lining in the cloud.
Mm,
And the silver lining in the cloud, to my mind, has been opening up of everyone's horizons on saying remote work can work.
mm-hmm.
Talent can be accessed not in one place, it can be accessed in any place in the world. Yeah. And that's such a great uh, benefit, not just for everyone in the world, but I think even for Africans, right? I mean, I don't know if you're experiencing this, but in our technology business, a lot of times we are finding people, technology resources saying to us that I've been employed by somebody in the US and I'm
And
working
working from
remotely.
home.
And I
Yeah.
think it's great. I mean, it hurts us because we have to keep losing talent and we have to keep figuring out what to do about it. But it's great for the economies. It's great for this country. It's great for Africa as a jurisdiction, yeah, as a geography. And so that's been one benefit. The second benefit has been that people have become a lot more conversant with digital,
Much more fluency.
much more fluency. Whoever was not educated has become educated, etc., etc. So I think people are beginning to see the benefit of digital. That has been another big benefit. Uh, and I think those are benefits which are here to stay.
Yeah.
They are both benefits here to stay for everyone at large, including Cellulant. The second part on the partnership with Mastercard. Uh, I mean, we exchanged a few messages on LinkedIn, but I think this is one of those cornerstone partnerships, I would say,
Mm,
between Cellulant and Mastercard, where we said that one of the problems, again, going back to the problem, because
mm-hmm.
everything that we are designing as a product has one fundamental tenet to it. Does it solve a problem or it doesn't solve a problem? And what was the problem we were trying to solve with virtual cards? Not to say that we are the first people, but let me illustrate why it's different. Today, many subscriptions, as you know, digital subscriptions, could be games, could be music, could be productivity tools, Microsoft, everything, storage, online storage,
Mm.
Dropbox, everything is becoming a subscription service.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the problems I think most Africans face or have faced is that you cannot put an auto subscription on any mobile money wallet, on most mobile money wallets. So there is no concept of auto debit.
That's true.
There is in some, so it's not factually correct, perfectly correct, but I would say it's hard and it doesn't work nicely. So that's one problem. Second problem is that people are somehow concerned, uh, very heavily concerned about things like misuse and fraud on credit cards and
Mm.
debit cards. And so credit card, debit card uptake in this continent has been very poor compared to when you look at other geographies. And maybe part of that is also because of mobile money,
Mm.
so proliferation. So it doesn't have some of the things that we think is needed to grow transactions. And so we came up with a concept of virtual cards, which can be topped up. So they are credit cards, but they are debit cards.
Mm.
They're not really credit cards because you're not getting credit, but they are cards on which you could, for example, put a subscription plan.
Mm.
You can also define, do I want to top this with 1,000 bob? I want to top it with 50,000 bob or 100,000 bob, right? And depending on your usage, you could choose to do that.
Okay.
You could also top it from any bank account and any mobile money wallet in many of the markets that we're launching. So you could choose where you want to take that money and how do you put it into this card. And those are some of the benefits of the virtual card that we've launched with Mastercard. We've currently launched it in Kenya, and the intention is to roll it out to 5 more markets in Africa over the next few weeks: Uganda, Tanzania, Zambia, Ghana,
Mm-hmm.
Nigeria.
And I think what I'm hearing more and more is that what you've managed to do, because you've built all these rails and connections across the banks, the mobile networks, it sort of gives you then the underpinning capability to do these exciting new fintech offerings, correct? I mean, this wallet is only able to, this virtual card becomes possible across markets because of that distributed infrastructure that you've put in place, correct?
Exactly. So the card can be used for local currency. It's very important. Most cards you will find on virtual cards are
Mm.
actually only dollar cards. They are actually majority of the virtual cards you will find on this continent today are dollar denominated cards, and these are cards which are in local currency
Mm.
because we wanted it for wide usage of the population. You can also go and do a dollar transaction if you want to go and buy
Yeah.
something in the United States of America. You could go and use it for that purpose,
Yes.
but you can also do local transactions within Africa, within this country, on Jumia, on your food ordering app or whatever,
Using the same.
without getting charged extra for foreign currency transactions.
Mm. Awesome. So, sitting from where you are, with your perspective, if you were future casting, looking at your crystal ball, where do you see Cellulant in the next 2 to 5 years as a business? What do you see yourselves doing, if you're looking out that far in terms of the business and some of the strategies?
I mean, I think our vision mission is to make payments as frictionless as we can so that it enables growth of African businesses and communities. That's what we want to do. Now, that's a very large statement, but since you asked me for an outlook, products that we are developing and thinking about are going to enable this ecosystem to function a lot more flawlessly.
Mm.
And I think as we contribute to that, and as I'd reiterate that we aren't the only guys doing this. There is an ecosystem, there's regulators, there's the government. We need the support of all of these people to bring it all together. But I think with that support, we can make a difference, an economic difference even, to the lives of millions of Africans on this continent.
Fantastic. I almost forgot to ask this question. I have to, because as we think about payments and that sort of thing, we have to obviously maybe talk a little bit about digital currencies and crypto. And I'm just curious to hear if that is an area that Cellulant is already dabbling in. Is that something that you're looking to maybe expand into? I'd just like to hear your point of view around the whole crypto and digital currency space.
I mean, look, digital currencies or crypto, and again, it's going to vary quite a bit by market, because there are markets in Africa which have categorically, as per regulation again, said that this is not permitted.
It's illegal, yeah.
It's not permitted. And so obviously our position in those markets is that we will have nothing to do with crypto, for example, in those
Mm,
markets. In markets where it's legal, and there are, recently you would have read an announcement about South Africa, you would have also read some announcements on Botswana, and there are a few other markets where it's so far permitted. I think in those markets our position is that we will work in that area because it's a fast developing area.
mm,
And then again, over there, we are, just to be clear, crypto is a very large space. So
extremely broad.
extremely broad. So I think the way we are thinking about crypto today is there a way for crypto to make transactions more efficient?
Mm,
Can merchants accept crypto payments? If, of course, again, regulatory guidelines permitting, right? Maybe crypto is another mechanism to pay as against a currency.
yeah.
The other use case of crypto is crypto as an investment class. I want to buy and store Bitcoin, just like you go and buy gold,
Mm,
right? It's an investment class by itself. And and different governments are taking very different positions. Some are saying we will crypto is completely banned. Some are saying investment class, okay, but no payments to be made on that.
mm,
Right? So I think we'll have to wait and watch how this evolves. But wherever it is permitted, we certainly are exploring and evaluating how can we power this so that it makes the transaction cycle more efficient.
okay.
Because again, you have to realize that crypto is bypassing the Swift network.
Exactly.
And in a way, that does make the transaction a lot more efficient, because credits, debits, all of that is happening almost real time simultaneously across borders, right? And of course, that does also expose it to more AML and anti-money laundering, or those kind of risks. And then you have to see, how do I manage those risks? How am I as an organization going to address those risks in
Yes.
this new world? So it's a bit evolving, I would say. um, Digital currencies, again, there's been talk. Nigeria has obviously done one, e-naira. And I think the intention is that wherever there are digital currencies, we would offer them along with our
Provided
platform,
it's
just
sanctioned
just like
by
in just like any other currency.
provided it's sanctioned by the central banks and so
Yeah,
forth.
yeah. I mean, most digital currencies are coming out as today as alternatives to the physical currency itself.
Correct.
So
Correct.
usually they are backed by the central bank and the government.
It's a one for one,
Yeah,
just on a
yeah, yeah,
digital
yeah.
situation.
It's just digitally managed.
Great. I think as we come to the end of our conversation, I have probably a couple more questions I'd like to ask you. And the first one would be, in the time that you've been at Cellulant, 2 years, I know during the pandemic, 2 years can feel like five. But what are some of the things that you've learned, lessons learned, positive, negative things? Any of the, from being in the driving seat of this business, what are some of the insights that you have sort of found or encountered as a result of being at the helm at Cellulant?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say building a business, whether frankly, and that's probably true of Cellulant, but I would say probably probably true everywhere. It's all about people.
Hmm.
Can you motivate? Can you energize the people in the team to, let's call it this way, to sign up to a common vision and a common goal?
Yes.
And I think that's extremely important. So that's sort of been, at least I would say, a reflection for me when I think back in time, and in a good way. Yeah. I think we've been able to do that over the last 2 3 years. Um, uh, the second learning I would say is, um, and I keep talking about this with my team, is that Cellulant, of course, we're headquartered in Kenya, but we are a Pan African business.
Correct.
And I think it's very important for us as we think about our business to be sensitive to everything in each of those markets.
Mm.
Because Cellulant without Cellulant Ghana is not Cellulant. Cellulant without Cellulant Nigeria is not Cellulant. So the value for us is actually the fact that I have these infrastructure that I was talking about in all these 18 to 30 markets that we are talking about. And the customers are also operating in those markets.
Yeah.
And so we have to be sensitive of saying what works for a customer in Nigeria may not work for a customer in Kenya. What works for a customer in Kenya doesn't work for a customer in Zambia. And so what are we doing as a business to be locally relevant and to adapt to the local environment? So that's, I would say, the second learning. And the third learning has been that I hear and I read a lot of, mixed articles that Africa regulation is a problem, and all of this stuff. But I actually think that regulators across the continent, it could be that some are slower than others or some are faster than others. I don't think that's the point. The point is people are open to listening to your viewpoint.
Mm.
You have to be ready to engage, and it's okay to be shot down. It's fine, because
Mm.
the fact of matter is you may never fully understand all the constraints that people are operating in,
Yeah.
right? But are people open to having a conversation? Are people open to new ideas? I think so. That's been my experience. I think, and that's a very encouraging thing, because I feel like, okay, we may not have all the best in class that you might see in some very developed market,
Mm.
but so what? We are also undergoing a journey, and as long as people are open to making changes, we'll keep getting better.
It's a journey. It'll take time. Akshay, thank you so much for joining us on the Pure Digital Passion podcast. It's been a pleasure. I want to wish you all the best with all the plans and activities that you're running at Cellulant. And we look forward to having you again on the Pure Digital Passion podcast.
Thank you, Moses. It's been a pleasure to be here. A little tiring with the number of questions you had, but it's okay.
Great.
Thank you so much.
And once again, to our audience, thank you for joining us. We do appreciate you listening or watching our podcast here today. And we hope to catch you in the next one.
Hi, my name is Akshay Grover from Cellulant. You're watching the Pure Digital Passion podcast.